Thank you very much, Guenther, for your very kind words. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very happy to see Daniel Gasteiger, first time in his place. I had a lot of opportunities to meet him in Brussels, and his contribution, just like Guenther's contribution to the way we build the blockchain ecosystem in European Union, their contribution is very, very important. And I very much thank them for their contribution to this effort. I think that I need to speed up a little bit. We have, of course, with blockchain, a fantastic opportunity to change many of our processes, understandings, business models. And I realized today in my trip from Basel to here that you have many incentives to do so because the traffic requires you to be at the same time in many places to avoid this traffic trouble. Well, I think that the only challenge here is to make sure that you will keep yourself immutable and, to the extent that concerns the European Union, GDPR compliant. Well, yes, it is about trust. Thank you for putting this title here in, for this event. It is about trust, and trust is an economic property. I will skip the many first details. I only want to tell you that we plan with Eva Kaili, the member of the European Parliament, who is the pioneer of this regulatory initiative in the European Union, that we want to start a program in economics that incorporates the concept of disintermediation. Well, disintermediation, oops, well, blockchain, yeah. Well, I can continue without it, or, well, disintermediation has powerful economic applications, which first of all allow to start thinking how economy can work without intermediaries. Financial intermediation in particular, have many properties. They reduce transaction costs, create efficient economies of scale and of scope. They can delegate monitoring, and through this monitoring delegation, they can reduce information asymmetries, moral hazard, agency problems, and also allow minimization of operational frictions, and in the case of finance, allow liquidity. How this new institutional design of blockchain can allow us to think about the future? In the course of the time, we know that every institution requires two elements: identity and trust. What is the future of institutional arrangements when the trust has to be the code and identity our digital fingerprint? Of course, no, it doesn't work, never mind. Well, of course, there are a lot of implications, microeconomic applications, macroeconomic applications, and political economy applications. This is a program we are about to start with Eva Kaili in the European Union, so as to put some theory behind the concepts and identify the value of blockchain in a more formal way. Now let's move forward and think how European Union actually attempted to build blockchain. The most important problem we faced was that out of the 751 members of the European Parliament, there were only 5 or 10 people knowing exactly what blockchain is. The most of the people knew that it is about Bitcoin, ICOs, it's fraud, it's money laundering, it's something bad. Well, our first aim was to raise demand within the House that blockchain is about trust, and make them explore further by giving us the opportunity to write a blockchain resolution. We managed to do it, And the first thing we did was to explain that blockchain is a fantastic opportunity to change market structure in a wide variety of sectors like energy, healthcare, copyrights, financial sector. So it's just a new opportunity to start thinking how different we can start working on that. Well, the idea, I think, worked because the members of the European Parliament voted almost unanimously, everybody but one, voted in favor of the blockchain resolution. And this indicated that the ground is really fertile because also the European Commission, who is the lawmaker of European Union, also followed by developing blockchain applications in education, in taxation, and so forth, so forth. Well, how we think about blockchain. It's very difficult when you open a Word document and start writing in a blank piece of paper from scratch, from where to start. So we needed some solid regulatory principles. Regulatory principle number one, we want to be innovation friendly. It's very difficult to regulate something which is still evolving and with uncertain impact. The second principle is to be technology neutral. We don't regulate the technology per se, but the users of the technology. Third, we are...
Try to do it again.
Okay, sure.
You have to go to point towards the laptop, yeah.
Okay.
There.
Still.
That's funny. If I do it, it works.
Okay, I will do it through, yeah. Here we are. And the most important to me is business model neutrality. We can see blockchain in two ways, either as a way to improve things we already do, or by disrupting markets altogether. This is not a job of the regulator to decide. It's a job of the market to decide. The sectors. We had many challenges to address in building our blockchain ecosystem. GDPR, legal certainty around smart contracts, operational challenges like interoperability and scalability, cybersecurity challenges. What is the future of blockchain in a quantum computing environment? And also, as an opportunity to use ICOs to mobilize idle capital. Another dimension is related to the government sector. Governments can also be very engaged in developing blockchain solutions. Here we have a very good collaboration with Digit, the institution of the European Commission that works on the digitalization of the European Union institutions. They try to develop interoperable solutions for the institutions and transfer technology to the municipalities of the member states. Next steps, where we are now. In 2 weeks, 3 weeks' time, we vote the blockchain resolution in the plenary in Strasbourg, the first Wednesday of October. The other very important development is the idea of having a flagship event with the commissioner responsible for digitization of European Union, Commissioner Gabriel. For the time being, the date is the 20th of November. Our keynote speaker is going to be Scott Stornetta, the founder of the concept of blockchain. He wrote the first article in 1992, I think, about the chain of blocks. We have a blockchain international trade report in November 2018. This is the first blockchain report which specifies in one certain aspect of the concern of the European Union. And the innovation here is we introduced the concept of crypto euro. We don't know how far it is from the ideas of the European Central Bank. They are certainly very skeptical about any blockchain application, and of course of losing the monopoly of creating money. And we are now in the crowdfunding regulation, which is a topic we can delve into during the discussion with Guenther. Here is the first introduction of the concept of ICOs in EU regulation. Again, unanimously with the support of all the parties so far, but the Greens. Well, nothing else to share with you right now. We can be more specific during the discussion. Thank you so much.
Well, I had this hope that we would go through the regulation article by article, but that's probably just me as the lawyer talking. But I think let's try to digest this and discuss this here in the panel with Doris and with Dani. And thank you also for joining, Doris. I think showing that the political realm of Switzerland is also involved here shows that things are getting real now. So, want to grab a chair? So maybe to start with you, Doris. I've been speaking in 32 countries since January. And, you know, it's not because I'm so good looking or so smart. No, the only reason I have been invited is because I'm from Switzerland. And that's the first time, because for the past 10 years I had to think which country I could travel to. And the reason for that is everybody was talking about the crypto valley. Now, I think, you know, crypto valley is always associated with Zug. I think it stretches by now far beyond the borders of Zug. I think it's definitely Zurich, you know, Zug. It goes all the way down to Geneva and around Lake Leman, where there's amazing things happening. In Lugano also has come to the table. So I believe, I don't like the word crypto nation. Also, I'm very appreciative of Mr. Schneider-Ammann and what he's done there. I would actually like to recoin it to blockchain nation, Switzerland. But whatever it is, everybody asks me, how did this come about in Switzerland? You're really good at doing chocolate and watches, and what is this? What is the secret ingredient? So that would be my first question to you, Doris. What do you think are the secret ingredients that enabled the blockchain nation, Switzerland?
So good evening, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you very much for your statements. And I would like to tell you that I'm in the Council of Europe, a member since 10 years. So your resolution will be really of interest for the Council of Europe too. So I hope I get the resolution very, very soon. Ladies and gentlemen, I think that we have a framework in Switzerland for our economy that was very liberal. Now, of course, it's a liberal who is speaking to you, but I think it's accepted that really a liberal frame did a lot for our success. So at this stage, I think it's very important, of course, you said it, to take the fear of the people and the population and to really strengthen trust. But I think it's also very important that we don't, you know, stop the evolution and innovation by doing, first of all, regulatives. And the director of FINMA, Mark Brunson, was with us when we had one of our first panels. And I think he said such a positive thing. Because when I started to get involved, I wanted to be sure that I was getting to be involved with something serious and not with something criminal. So I wanted to talk to Mr. Brunson, and he said to me, listen, Mrs. Fiala, I tell you something. Do you know what this is? And I said, I have no clue what you mean. And he said, this is 1 million Swiss francs if you have it in cash. You could take it with your bag and no one would know what you're doing. So first of all, I would like to let you know that probably 1 million Swiss francs in cash is more dangerous for the FINMA And we are discussing this more than framework now for the crypto and the blockchain valley. But then he was very serious, and he reminded that now he will first watch, and certainly also all those who want to be successful, they have an interest to have a good framework that cannot go too far, but enough to really build up trust. So if Mark Branson would really do that, I think we can be happy. If he does not go further. And certainly we want to have the same level playing field in Europe and the rest of the world. And there is one thing I would like to say, because even our minister, Schneider-Ammann, he realized that it was such a stupid thing to say that we are the crypto nation. And he said, oh, Sutta, this is was at the beginning when I did not understand right. And he tries to really change the image of the crypto nation all the time. So he would talk about blockchain nation as you do. Thank you very much.
More power to him. You know, one confession, when I was younger, a lot younger, and I was growing up and a teenager, I was really totally, amazed by the unfolding of the internet. And, I was this little juvenile delinquent, so I became a bit of a cyberpunk, if you like. But I really liked the idea that it would make everything a better place. The idea that it would connect people, everybody would have access to information, and, eventually everybody would rise and everybody would have sort of more equality in the world. That was just the delusional idiot I was. And what we've ended up with, and this is totally on my generation, I think we totally screwed it up, right? Rather than create a better world for anybody, we created a more convenient world for everybody. But what we also achieved is that there is more power concentrated in the hands of fewer people than ever. Mr. Zuckerberg has more power than the Russian Tsar could ever have dreamt of. He's controlling and influencing the life of 2 million people, 2 billion people, right, single-handedly. It's not even a corporation or a government, it's a single person. So this was not my idea. I believe it's not most people's idea. So we get a second chance now with the blockchain. I hope we don't screw it up, but we have a new generation out there, so I hope you do get it right. So my question to you, Dani, is the internet created a more convenient world. I believe blockchain can create a better world for everybody, not just the privileged. So where do we stand here? What is the biggest challenges? And I know you're working on amazing things in this realm.
So far. Right, the biggest challenges, I think it's more still the technical side. The convenience is still not there, and what we've seen with the internet, the evolution the same thing needs to happen with blockchain. So actually, ultimately, the key question is how can we conveniently manage our private key, which is the access to everything, be it the money, the identity, or anything else. So technology-wise, we're not quite there yet that this is mass production ready. And so that's, from the technology perspective, the biggest problem, I think. But what we've seen now the last 2 years, especially also through the hype of the ICOs. Last year, new ideas came to the market. New ideas are actually being proposed on a daily basis. We here in Trustware have quite a lot of good ideas that are being developed. I'm super excited about the projects that we have managed to attract to the building. We've seen that today at the open day we managed to attract quite a few people. I was really surprised how many people turned up and came to see what's going on here at the Trustware and see the projects that we are doing. We also had just a quick tour before with Doris and the Minister for Economic Development here in Zurich. So it's fantastic to see that interest. And now it's just a question for us, the startups, to develop systems that are ultimately able to be used by average Joe, as some people call it, or by the average person that is not so technologically advanced in using systems. And so I think that's the challenge now. Then obviously the technology itself, scalability is just the classic argument about the technology. It's not scalable enough, it's not in some ways economically friendly enough. So there's a lot of these technological challenges, but again there, blockchains started with Bitcoin, then we came to Ethereum. Now we have much more efficient solutions that are either privately in consortium management, or also totally new blockchains like the Tezos or the Difinity that are coming to the market, which again take some time until they are mass production ready, but we are getting there. It's just the time that it takes.
Very good.
If I may make a brief comment, I skipped it from my presentation, but a wonderful lady here made a very serious comment. It's a liberal technology, and I'm a social democrat, Hayekian, social democrat, but I would like to show you something that I think it's interesting in terms of political economy. Well, I need to go to the presentation. In 1989, I think, the famous American political economist Fukuyama introduced us to the concept of the end of history, but also to the concept of the last man. The last man is a very powerful notion. Interestingly, comes from a Marxist or Hegelian interpretation of the world. It says that the last man cannot be improved in terms of trust with more social engineering. Blockchain comes to challenge this Fukuyama's notion, and I have here a little picture that I put together just yesterday. Guenther makes really fancy presentations. This was just a last minute's presentation. I would like to show that our way towards a blockchain proof society requires to take into consideration, both in terms of market and in terms of government, two things: that societies build on different concepts of trust, societies with very high social capital and community understanding of trust, like Switzerland or Germany, are more blockchain proof, whereas societies with family-based trust, like Greece or Italy, are more rigid to adopt blockchain solutions. And also we need to build markets and governance frameworks, having in our mind that we operate in an environment of variegated capitalisms or variegated neoliberalisms. Well, in this case, closer you are to this side, the more efficient blockchain solutions you have, more fast. If you are toward this side, it's more difficult. And this is something that I think adds in your presentation on the diffusion of innovations we often see in your presentations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dimitrios. That actually ties nicely in the other question I had. And you see how wonderful blockchain is. Here you have a true libertarian, and here you have a social democrat, and we're still sitting here together and we're best friends and talking about doing stuff. So that's the power of blockchain for you. One question I had for you, and I'm not trying to ignore you, I know you have a comment for this, is it ties into this and it sort of ramped that one up, is 2 weeks ago I was speaking in San Francisco, and there was regulators from the US there, from Asia and from Europe. And the one thing I took away was that Europe, usually we're bashing the EU and whatnot, has become a real thought leader in this. The US is sort of entrenched. They have a very clear position, whatever. They say, oh, it's a security here, it's a commodity there, and they define the rules you have to play with, and they're saying, no, utility tokens don't exist, and so they're not sort of moving. They're not creating thought leadership to open up the horizon for everybody. Asia is somewhere in between. Obviously, they had all the hacks and so forth to suffer, which made them very conservative. The EU, on the other side, is fundamentally thinking about how this could play out. So I think it's most important to watch what's going on in the EU. Now, my question to you would have been is, what can the EU learn from Switzerland, which is the other trailblazer in this area, and in particular its principles-based regulation and its decentralization, which is part of our DNA and our consensus building mechanism, if you like. And on the other hand, and that's maybe something to put into the rucksack of Ms. Fiala when going back to do the political work, is what can Switzerland in turn learn from the EU? But you had another comment here before you answer, maybe. Of course.
I'm not a libertarian, I'm a liberal. This means, liberalism is always together freedom and responsibility. And this is why Mr. Gasteiger, he convinced me. Being the chair of the Committee of Migration and Refugees in the Council of Europe, I have been in all refugee camps that are really seriously changing your mind. If you go back, maybe liberalism is another subject. And I saw the possibilities in international development with blockchain. And I must say we have been together in Satari. It's a camp, one of the biggest camp of Syrian refugees in Jordan. And their iris identity is already a reality. And we have been there with the Committee of Migration and Refugees. They were just spellbound when they saw how much further they already go. Or, for example, the project for e-identity for the Rohingya refugees. All those subjects really do matter and give the proof. It's not only people are talking still now a lot of crypto, and I wouldn't talk badly about it at all. I think this is one part, but there are so many other possibilities, and I think for international development, it is just incredible if you want to build trust, e-identity. I think Procivis, they are really the first who gave the proof that e-identity now in Switzerland, in Schaffhouse, is a reality. I think this is absolutely great. I don't know how long it will take us to convince the other cantons, and especially also Switzerland national-wise. But I think we can go further and give the proof that there is nothing to fear, but the chances are so incredible. And ladies and gentlemen, I always like to say, give me first 3 reasons where you can see the chances and not the fear. So if we do it together, I think we can really change a great deal. Thank you so much.
So here's the first thing to take back to Brussels, right?
The first thing I would like to underscore is that Switzerland has a very strong competitive advantage coming from its size, its efficiency, its long traditions. And when we started exploring blockchain in EU, Switzerland had already state-of-the-art infrastructure. Proof is that we immediately had a cooperation with Daniel. What we can learn from Switzerland: best practices, use cases, how things work in the real world. Use cases, governance approach is the suitable approach in developing good regulation if we are sincerely technology neutral and business neutral people. The way to learn from you, I'm liberal too, it's obvious, through competition. By making a very strong blockchain ecosystem here, we can learn a lot by doing this. In the Article 39 of our blockchain resolution, we urge the Commission to make sure that a European Union will be the leader of blockchain, just like the United States was the leader in the era of internet. So if we really want to have this small victory, the last time we had a victory in the European Union was long ago. If we start having small victories like that, we will regain first and foremost the trust of the everyday people. So we work together. Thank you very much for this idea of the Council of Europe. We should build a cooperation on that, and we can discuss about these options afterwards. And yes, continue doing these fantastic jobs. We are looking at you. You are the microscope.
Very good. So we just started another thing here. By the way, we made a deal before. He probably doesn't know yet because he was driving and just said yes. I know it's almost impossible to get the text of the blockchain resolution. It's not available on the internet because it doesn't work on the link. But if you send him an email, everybody who's in the room will get it.
Okay.
You will have fun answering that. So we've heard. Good. So we've heard about the smallness of Switzerland being an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage. And one thing we are feeling, we're working with many clients who are setting up blockchain-based companies in Switzerland. There's a lot of them coming to Switzerland right now because they're attracted by the advantages which have been elaborated. But one key challenge is talent. Now there's a lot of talented people, right? I think every Swiss person is talented, but truth is we're half the size of Bavaria. So there is a scalability issue there as well. And particular when it comes to the crucial technology expertise, programmers and so forth, that's a big problem. So maybe a question to you, Doris. And I'm not talking about banks not accepting sort of bank accounts for blockchain companies, but what can we do about this? What is your plan here? And you know, why do we continue to vote for you? What's sort of your strategy?
It's almost blackmailing, huh? I'd like to tell you what I have lived under this roof in my office. There is a guy from India. I really think he's a great guy. And he was afraid of not getting the permit, the work permit. But I think more afraid than him we were all together. And when he finally got the permit, it was a real celebration because Switzerland really needs those talents, all those engineers and specialists in computer science, etc. And I think this is really a real challenge, whether we will be able to convince the majority of Switzerland, because as you know, we are going to vote all the time, we have direct democracy, all the time people can influence what is happening in this country. And this is why you're so right, that trust is really a key to get what we want, to get all those people. And you know, many of those young talents are not from the European Union, but they are from India, from Canada, from the US, from, as we call it, countries who are not in the bilateral contract. So it's not so sure that we can get the talents. We have only a few thousands that we can have per year. And it's really a fight among the banks and among Roche and among industry, among us, who will get the young talents. So I think there we really must communicate well. We must show the population all those incredible chances and challenges that we can face. And this is a key for the future success of Switzerland, because we are an open society, we have liberal minds, but there are also different challenges, as you know. And I think not only Switzerland has the challenge, Europe has the challenge. And Germany can also talk about it. So I think it's very important to have the balance. And as a politician, I would say, if you want to convince the people about your foreign affair, political ideas, you must have them in your boat, and you must always think of inner political affairs. Otherwise, they won't give you their trust. So it always goes together.
Thank you. Dani, maybe for you, one thing. 5 days ago, we had the 10th anniversary of Lehman falling and the financial crisis which happened afterwards. Now, what people sometimes overlooked, and I only realized when I read one of our latest large-scale studies in that, is that the millennial generation, which is now increasingly coming to the table, they grew up in the aftermath of the financial crisis. And one of the things that has happened out of that is there's huge mistrust, which we measured sort of on a global scale in sort of interviewing them into institutions as such. On the other hand, they grew up with the idea of shared economy. And again, we underestimate that, I believe. I mean, if I talk to my father or my mother and just share the idea of sharing a cab ride with somebody you've never seen, as you can do with Uber, or that you actually sleep on somebody's couch when you travel somewhere and do couch surfing, right? That's all shared economy, which obviously has the benefit of unlocking value that is otherwise in the economy. The one thing Uber really did is not kill taxes. It basically gave jobs to people who didn't have a job but a car. Those kind of things which were basically enabled by shared economy ideas. But one of the problem is that since they're financial institutions and so forth, they will never trust. They rather go to the dentist, as they answered correctly, than to a bank, is the public infrastructure, which is very important, but that's they rely on. Now, the uptake is still slow. I mean, we're really applauding things that are happening in Schaffhausen and so forth. I know you're doing amazing work there, Dani, so my question to you would be, what can all of us do to help you in your work to have the uptake in the public sector speed up?
First of all, I guess the people that are in this room are already doing a lot because they came here to listen to this topic of what blockchain in Europe is all about and general blockchain. So that's already good. So we need to just communicate. It's our job to communicate to the public better what we are doing when it comes to blockchain technology and what the opportunities are. And people like Doris and other people that are involved in this community that we have here in Zurich and in Zug can do a good job there. So ultimately the question for us is we need to be a little bit more open in Switzerland. I just was in Israel on the weekend with the delegation for the finance minister to discuss with the Israelis on what the opportunities are in fintech. So there was a fintech mission. And so kind of seeing what the Israelis are doing when it comes to startups and the risks they take and how they basically ultimately turn these risks into very good ventures, which they are, and they are the startup nation, compared to Switzerland is a lot to learn. And so I think people need to be more open to take risks. I can, for myself, took that risk in 2015 when I left my corporate job and really started digging into this entrepreneurship that I always dreamt about, and then finally took the chance and risked this step. I think that's what we need to do, and we need to be more open to failure as well when it comes to people that don't make it for the first time. And in Israel, it was discussed in a meeting with a VC that I attended. Then there was a roundtable with the finance ministry. There is a good thing to fail, because that basically makes people, if they then do the second job, much stronger, because they went through this failure and learned from it and ultimately grew out of it and were much stronger than somebody that goes just on a straight line up as a startup entrepreneur. Sometimes there is going to be failure, and that's something that we need to accept, and that's missing in Switzerland, the failure culture. And then for me personally, when it comes to our product with e-government in the widest sense, I'm very happy we have the take-up here in Switzerland with Schaffhausen. They are a really small canton. They are very open to innovation. They are really kind of just go with it. Similar to Zug. Zug has been a kind of a poster child from that perspective when it comes to Bitcoin acceptance in the municipality of Zug. So these are the things that we should do more, and we need to, in the national parliament, foster that message that also taking a risk as a canton can be beneficial. And again, even if it fails, a project doesn't go as planned, that's not the end of the world. That's why it's a good system that we have here with the federalistic system. We can take experiments. And personally, I want to promote next year. Our big mission for next year is e-voting. We want to build a product, and we did a product which we showed today together with the University of Zurich to do e-voting based on blockchain that is sustainable, and just more than just e-voting, but really e-democracy, collecting signatures via blockchain-based mechanisms and so forth. That is our mission for the future, and I hope we find a canton and a national parliament that is supporting this as a strategic vision for Switzerland as well.
I would like to add the following. You know, I have done so many observations of election for the Council of Europe, and the last time I was in the lead of the mission in Kyrgyzstan. And we always have the idea that all those countries are far behind in technology and everything. And the group of observation people, they were absolutely spellbound when they realized that Kyrgyzstan has already e-counting. And Switzerland, they are very critical and afraid whether there can be cheating and whatsoever. And but then we realized that in countries like Kyrgyzstan, they are far advanced. And then if you think it over, you say in Switzerland, everybody at home gets the envelope with everything inside, and for the voting, and then with a clip's eye, I can tell you, so many fathers in the families would say, listen, give me your papers, you can sign, but I realize you don't understand what this is all about, so I fill in the form and you do the signature. This, ladies and gentlemen, with e-voting would be impossible. Couldn't do that anymore. And so if Swiss people are a little bit critical, I always kindly remind them with a clip's eye that we probably are not the best example of never cheating, you know. We don't know whether some envelopes will be lost or whether what happens at home. And we have a lot of trust because the system is very old. But when it comes to e-voting, we are very critical. So I think if we tell stories like this with a clip's eye, sometimes you can change really a great deal and people start to think and say, okay, of course we have a very old direct democracy, but probably we are not 100% perfect either.
And I think what we also should do is what I did yesterday. I went to the Pass Bureau because I needed to renew one, or I had the wrong stamps in there, so I needed a second one to go to Israel. And I asked the charming lady at the counter when I will get a chance to get my e-identity. She just looked at me like with blank eyes, and she was like, "What's blockchain?" You know. So we have to be very careful, huh? We are the freaks and the geeks in here. We are far advanced, but you know, if everybody asks about it, maybe somebody will go like, maybe that's interesting on a larger scale. So you know, if there's 80 people going there asking them about it, maybe that has an impact. Just do it. We will not leave this room without Dimitrios sharing with us what's happening in the ICO space still for the first time ever. Nobody has heard it, nobody has seen it, so we will be the first ones. But Doris needs to leave at 7, which is like 3 minutes ago. Well, we can just lock the door, but since she's probably the only one of us who has to do really important work tonight still, I still wanted to give you the chance to ask a couple of questions maybe and open up the floor. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't reach all the way back, so you will have to do something that Swiss people hate. You will have to get up and come out front if you have questions you would like to address to the panel, and in particular to Doris. Come on, don't go Swiss on me. Here we go. No, that's the lady first, Patrick.
Okay. I'm a Turkish and Swiss citizen, and I admire very many. Oh, thank you. Teşekkürler. I admire many parts of Switzerland and the democracy and everything. And you talked about, the question is to you, you talked about inviting all those people from other nations where we don't have a bilateral agreement. How about Swiss nationals who are interested? Are they going to get a chance to be educated and be part of this development?
I think we have a fantastic example. My personal assistant, I'm the president of Liberal Women, and my personal assistant right now is educated now under the roof of Trust Square and Procivis. And I think whenever she tells me, whenever she is speaking with her students and her friends, they are so amazed that there is a woman in blockchain. And we are doing, actually, we are doing every second month, we have really seminars for beginners and for advanced people. We call it Women in Blockchain, and in brackets we say urban men are warmly welcome. So we really promote all this for women. And I think your question is very important because it's very tricky now. We don't want to lose a generation of women thinking, oh, this might be not specially for women. So we underline women in blockchain, but urban men are more than welcome.
I think it's very important. Actually, I'm quite proud about the male-female ratio in here. If I'm speaking at a lot of conferences, and usually the ratio is different. It's not yet where it should be, but I think we're doing okay in this industry. Not when we then rise up in the organization, but you know, keep it up. I mean, we have one charming woman joining us from Vienna here. Natalie came all the way from the West Coast to be here. Not tonight, but you know, so you know, everybody's attracted to Switzerland to learn. So again, I think we're a good example here. But I'm fully with you, Patrick.
Actually, the lady kind of stole a part of my question already, but you did a great job. Thanks a lot. In 1998, the German youth magazine Bravo had a headline. Anyone familiar with Bravo in here?
No,
I am.
was a metal hammer guy.
Okay. But the headline back then in 1998, that wasn't in totally ancient times, was going online, is it worth it? And they asked teenagers. And the answers were not really unilaterally positive. They said, well, infrastructure, user experience, even though they didn't call it user experience, but infrastructure, information, very hard to find. And when I came across that article again a few weeks ago, I realized that we are kind of at the similar stage here when it comes to blockchain and crypto. What could politics and, more importantly, the thought leaders like you and of course also in Europe as well as here as the mayor of Trust Square, what could we do in order to create a more positive, a more optimistic outlook that technology eventually, with Moore's law, will help solve the problems we have with scalability and user experience, etc. What we really need is the vision, the idea, and the imagination, what could be done. And I wonder what the folks here in the panel see, what's their opinion and how we can reach that vision.
I think, yes. I think
I'm old enough to know Bravo.
I can't remember the headline, but I think I sympathize with the question. So ultimately, I think what we have done here at Trust Square, without tapping my own shoulders, but we have a team of 5 founders here, and we really have managed to get together a group of people that cross all the full spectrum of what blockchain is all about. Starting it with our friends from the Zentrum, who are really thinking totally different about not more than just blockchain, but also decentralization in general. Explaining that in a way that is unheard of, in the sense I've not seen that anywhere in the world, with prototypes of this satellite that we have in the building, and new ideas of self-autonomous house management, and so all these ideas that are not technology. It's all about new ways of explaining what this technology is all about. Then we have my friend Semi, whom I'm really excited about his football project that he's doing. I think that's also a thing that is a world sensation. I've not heard about that anywhere in the world, and this is such a great idea. And then we have obviously Anton, one of the most high-profile figures in the blockchain space here in Switzerland, with his companies, and before with Lykke as well. And ultimately, Mark as the co-founder and the board member of Modum, which has been the most prominent case last year when he's as the first successful ICO. So we have a lot of different people involved in these things just in our founding team. And now it's just a question of what our open house today was more meant to be all about, is come people, bring them here, have a look what's going on here, have a look at what's happening. And we are, again, as I said earlier, we need to educate people on what we are doing, and have figures like Doris, prominent figures on the national level, on the state level. We also try to get Corinne Mauch to come at some stage as well to visit us here in Zurich, and so kind of on every level get people involved, and that's the only thing how we can get this message across, and how get people excited about, but not the technology, but the thing that's behind the technology, peer-to-peer and all these open source. And you have said that before. I mean, these are concepts that are new, that young people, and we have not managed. We didn't, for Procivis, we didn't hire. We just were actually running into people that came to us, that talked to us, that were on the bench probably for 6 months, and then when we could start hire somebody again, we just called them up and they were ready to join us, because they're interested in what we are doing as a business, and not interested in money. We don't pay salaries that are anywhere near in what they could potentially get as a HSG master student or something just down the street, obviously. And so that's the big opportunity if we kind of continue to foster that ecosystem and talk the story of blockchain.
I think it's about talking, and very important. You asked me before if you can tweet, so I know Effie, Urs, Patrick, you're really strong at that. Talk about it, because usually in my presentations I have the S-curves of innovation and the bell curves of adoption, and everybody has to suffer through that, but it's so fundamentally important. We have to realize it's very early days. We are at the stage of earliest adopters, and if you compare it to internet, we're maybe 93, 94, maybe 98 as you referenced. So I wanted to have internet access in '98, and I told the story yesterday at the conference, so sorry who's already heard it, but I went to my father, who was a very intelligent man, and I was like, you know, I need this thing, BTX, as I called it at the time, to get access to literature for my thesis. And, you know, I was using the beta version of Amazon, not to order books, but it was an extended library search tool for me, so I could find literature on venture capital, which nobody knew anything about here. They just said venture what, you know. And so, but there was this computer at the university, but I always had to drive there for an hour and back just to find it, and then call my grandmother in the US to order the book for me at Barnes & Noble and send it over. So there was no talks about what it eventually became to. So I went to my father and said, can I have internet access? And he said, no. And I said, why, Father? And then he said, I know everything about this thing, the internet. And I said, pray, Father, what is that? And he said, it's just about pornography. And it's a true story. And my father's a very intelligent man, you know, but, you know, I always, you know, teased him with that story. But that's sort of what we have to expect. So it's all about education and sharing, and we have to be mindful that it's not self-explanatory. Now, people will actually not care about the blockchain. Like, I don't care how the internet works. If I ask most people how the internet works, who cares? I also have no idea how my car works. I just push a button, and if it doesn't start, I shout at people, you know. That's what you do. But nevertheless, it's about getting them enthusiastic about it. So by all means, do tweet about it, do talk about it, share information about it, and send them to Trust Square, send them to the Crypto Valley, to all of those great places opening up. It's about people need to touch and see it. And I know we had this beautiful drinks in Venice 2 weeks ago, right? And then, you know, you meet people wherever you go, and they just want to learn about it. They want to hear about it. So it's on a mission. We can be missionaries. It's great, great times. That's what we got to do, carry the torch. If you have to leave, we won't be cross. But now it's the time. Does anybody want to hear about what's going to happen to ICOs in Europe? No, really not? Yes. Totally. All right. So the floor is yours.
Well, I will try to be brief. In the crowdfunding regulation that was recently introduced in the European Union, in the initial text was a mentioning on ICOs as a crowdfunding instrument. However, when the file came to the Parliament, we observed that ICOs was not there. And the explanation we got from the Commission was ICOs will not be in this file. First, because we are regulating the platforms and not the instruments. Second, because ICOs is more or less private placement thing and not something that needs an intermediator. Third, because ICOs in average in the European Union raise capital of about 12 million, whereas the crowdfunding regulation speaks about raising capital of up to 1 million. And fourth, ICOs is by default international, whereas the crowdfunding regulation tries to address the problem of cross-border crowdfunding problems, especially for the member states that lack the crowd. Latvia. Well, we also got the message from the cabinet of Valdis Dombrovskis, who is the Capital Markets Union Commissioner, that he is also skeptical about this file and introducing ICOs. But as long as the file was in the Parliament, the parliamentarians have the capacity to amend the regulation. So we managed to introduce the concept of ICOs, and we have now the idea. Yes.
I'm so sorry, but I really have to leave.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Now we got it all to ourselves.
Okay.
Another hour.
Well, so what happened? We had to find a smart way, because the rapporteur is British, which means that leaves the House in March and not in May like the rest. So we had to speed up somehow the procedure to make sure that the file is going to be completely done by February. Well, we introduced a concept that uses ICOs as a legitimate instrument for crowdfunding platforms. We had actually to take a bet or to take a risk by expanding the regulation and introducing instruments and not just the platforms. or keep it in the scope of platforms without instruments and introduce ICOs as a legitimate instrument for crowdfunding platforms. We have chosen to follow the second path in order to speed up the procedure. So, what we introduced here is ICOs as a legitimate instrument for platforms. We avoid any kind of definition that goes in this, debate about securities, commodities, etc. We know very well that the securities definition we have right now in the United States does not work practically in Europe. First, because Europe has not a definition of securities. Every member state has its own definition of securities. We have MiFID without definition of securities. The second problem is that the vast majority of the ICOs in the European Union are utility tokens, do not resemble an instrument that looks like equity or a claim to future cash flows. So what we did was to keep it simple, not speak about too many details, introduce ICOs as a contractual relationship between somebody who introduces the token, what kind of liabilities this gentleman or this lady has to the buyer of those tokens. We introduce the way that the platform should make some due diligence verification procedures. And we sent this first draft, which is not public yet, of course, to the commissioner, and the commissioner gave the green light. We think that we will have a very modest introduction to ICOs, but still we will have an introduction to ICOs. We hope that the standards that will work for the intermediation process, which is the platform, will somehow work for the private placements as well, to increase some legal certainty around this instrument. And we also hope in the second level means in December, a European Commission will publish a paper on ICOs, and in late November, ESMA will publish its own paper on ICOs. We hope to avoid in the second stage to be entrapped in definitions like security or commodity. Commodity doesn't work for sure. Maybe it is an alternative investment, a brand new asset class. We don't make too many definitions about it. The regulation of alternative investments in the European Union with AIFMD is really flexible, and some mutual recognition is enough to move forward. Our aspiration is to mobilize idle capital to high-risky projects of the so-called fourth industrial revolution technologies, or the second machine age technologies, which is the source of growth for the advanced economies according to OECD reports. And hopefully we will manage to attract both project initiators and capital in the European Union. Hopefully in the coming year, 2019, we will have a framework for ICOs which is going to be very liberal and also legal certain. Thank you.
So we now need to get that into Twitter format. So just to recapture. So essentially, you're trying to use the same concept as in the AFMD to some degree, where again it was mostly a regulation of the managers, not of the products, with some product elements. But the products itself were sort of national still, and sort of yes, the custodian was brought in, but it's not a product regulation; it's a manager regulation. True. So again, here you're trying not to regulate the instrument, but you're trying to use, and again, trust is important here, the intermediary / the platform, and provide guidance and requirements around those. And when those are ticked, the ICO can be conducted, and you also expect mutual recognition and hopefully then passporting, so we can sort of unlock the potential of the harmonized market.
Let me add here that it will defeat the purpose to have very different due diligence requirements for the conventional crowdfunding operations and different due diligence requirements for an ICO. We will have similar and very simple and very straightforward due diligence operations, because we don't want to increase the cost for the platforms. And of course, we have observed that many initiators of projects, of tokens, spend the most of their seed capital to lawyers and accountants. We want to have to lawyers and accountants. Thank you.
All right, thank you for this. Well, I got 43 more questions here, but Sammy is looking at me. We also got drinks and nibbly bits and stuff out there. We got this beautiful terrace overlooking the city, and we can glance over to the Swiss National Bank and say slowly goodbye to it. So I think we go out there. We will all be hanging around. We would love to engage. We would love to discuss. I hope you liked that format. Did you? So if so, I'm happy to announce that the next one will be October 18. Now you know this one sold out within a day, so you better be quick when we open up the registration on Monday. It will be this time at the Experience Center, the PwC Experience Center at Ritterstrasse, and I guess next time we're back here at Trust Square then. The subject next time will be well, we will have the guys from eStonia over here, or some of the guys who built eStonia, and they will talk about that, because we all agree this is where it all starts. If you want to build the trust, it is the governance level. So of course I hope that we have Dani again there, who is not only the mayor of Trust Square, but he's also the godfather of e-governance government in my book. And we will have Britt Martinsson with us, who did that and who's exporting it now across the world, helping governments to do that on e-working, on e-registers and all of those good things. And he will be talking from the trenches, how they did that, the failures they had, the problems and the opportunities they see right now. And we will have a couple of other speakers as well, or panelists who will be announced shortly when we open this up. So follow social media, and we hope to see you again at the Experience Center next time. And now we hope to see you all out there on the balcony to share drinks with us. Thank you for attending.